Welcome to the Cedar Park United podcast. Today we hear from the Apostle Paul's first letter to his friend and colleague Timothy. God calls us to be rich in helping others. In his reflection, lay worship leader Paul Clarke asks, how hard can it be?
Tell the rich to go after God who piles on riches, to do good, to be rich in helping others, to be extravagantly generous. Seems like a command to the one percenters, doesn't it? Let's look at Cedar Park United. It's located in Pointe Claire, a suburb that has strong house values. One of my neighbors was telling me how houses are going for well past $1 million somehow in our neighborhood. A Google search states that Pointe Claire has above average income, above Quebec, above Canada, and I'm guessing many people here have TFSAs, RRSPs. If you're over 71, then you have a RIF, and maybe you have some stock market action. It said in the Globe and Mail last week that stocks in Canada have doubled in the last 10 years. So our area does well in the riches of the earth. We all seek security. We also recognize that a balance is needed. Now, I live just down the street here on Lakeview Avenue. I often wonder about a particular metric because we have a lot of empty nesters in our neighborhood. What's the number of bedrooms per person in local homes? When our kids were young, the number was probably 0.5 or 0.75 bedrooms per person because you're sharing. As you get a better house, perhaps it becomes 1 bedroom per person. Kids move away and the number moves to 1.5 or even 3 or 4 bedrooms per person in the house. What about the number of shirts owned per person in your home? What about the number of black shirts or the numbers of pairs of shoes per person in your house? Living on Lakeview, like a lot of you, I look at the number of trips per household per year. Any resident of Pointe Claire can marvel by looking up at the sky at any time of day and wonder, where are all those airplanes headed? How can so many people be traveling? We're lucky we're inside. The speaker doesn't get drowned out by the airplanes as they do at the Stuart Hall concerts. Don't we hear the economy's in difficulty? Of course, we can have savings and we can travel. But Timothy in the reading is told to tell the rich to help others, to be extravagantly generous. To me, one way to be generous is to consciously meet the people of some of our community partners who accompany people looking for support. I could talk about the people at Bread and Beyond who provide food to people who don't have homes and startup kits for apartments. Or we could talk about the West Island Mission trying to reduce food insecurity close by. As many of you know, I've worked in the last decade for a couple of organizations which provide accompaniment to people new to Canada. So let me tell you about some of the people I met and the generosity I've seen. At Action Réfugiés Montréal, we offered a twinning program for women. We would have group events, but we noticed one lady always said she would come and she never showed up. We finally found out that she couldn't afford $6.50 for 2 bus tickets to get to an event and off. So we bought her a bunch of bus tickets. I recall a man of Syrian extraction coming to the office. He was settled here in Canada. He had 3 brothers. They were each married, and they each had 2 children. He wanted to sponsor all 12 people to come to Canada to get away from the war in Syria. Every year, we met hundreds of people in the immigration detention center, people who had to pay $5 or $10 to make long-distance phone calls to try to reach a family overseas. Our organization tried to be generous in meeting the needs of those people. I could get requests from my colleagues. So-and-so needs a suitcase. They are being deported from Canada. I would ask help from people in the church. My basement became a used suitcase warehouse. I was asked for suits for men. I got to know the suit and shoe sizes of some of the Cedar Park gentlemen here. Some of you have smaller feet than you would think. I would get requests for coats, kids' clothes, kids' shoes. So So some of you agreed to defray whatever I spent when I would go to Nova, buy the stuff, and I would just let you know, well, I spent $42 for this family. You would be paying for things for people you've never met. Once there was a need for a baby stroller. Among the people I asked, one incredibly went out and actually bought a great used stroller for us to provide to a young family. In the letter it says, if we have bread on the table and shoes on our feet, that's enough. Well, we can recognize that that people we don't know also need food and shoes on their feet. 10 years ago, there was a widespread call to sponsor Syrian refugees. To my amazement, the federal and provincial governments urged us all to get involved. Just so you're aware, they no longer urge us to do that. Cedar Park United opened its generosity tap, as did many other faith communities in Montreal and across Quebec. I think Cedar Park community is richer for having been generous in that instance. One aspect that stood out for me over the years, many of us are ready to look in our closets and find items we no longer want or need or fit. But how often do we think of providing a newcomer or a person without a home with something actually new? A new shirt, new dishes, maybe new furniture. I recall being struck one time. A fellow had arrived in Canada and it took a while to get a work permit and then to find a job. He basically lived off donations of others. He actually lived with some people here in Point Claire at one point. After his first paycheck, we went to Walmart because he wanted some new clothes and other kitchen items. When we left the store after paying, he showed me the receipt. He asked what it was, and he was about to throw it out. So I said, no, you keep the receipt in case you want to return something. He had no clue what I was on about. And I figured this was the first receipted purchase that he had made other than food since he had come into Canada. Perhaps sometimes we can find ways to be extravagant in our donations and provide something new. At Montreal City Mission, we met many women who were new to Canada who were isolated. They came from cultures that did not expect women to work outside the home. Montreal City Mission created a program to burnish the skills the women had with cooking and sewing and other activities to help them find work. We would have English and French courses to help them be able to be interviewed for jobs. The mission also operates a free legal clinic to refugee claimants who have been refused. The clinic accompanies people also to be reunited with their families. These are programs of generosity with empowerment as a basis for long-term wholesomeness. We know we don't all just need food and clothes. We need our family members, especially our children, close by. Responding to the call for particular items, like clothes or suitcases, is important. But providing financial resources to these community organizations is vital. And just so you know, extravagant donations are welcome. What do the recipients of items or accompaniment of legal support provide or do? Well, recipients of generosity can't get into reciprocity with us. Over the years, the most common phrase I heard was, "Que Dieu vous bénisse." One of my former colleagues made it into an acronym. She would text me and say, "I got 2 QDVBs today," because it was so common. Calling on God's blessing to the donor is often all the treasure a recipient can conjure up. And isn't God's blessing a wonderful gift for us to receive? Now, as many of you know, here's the pitch. As many of you know, Action Réfugiés Montréal is holding an event next Saturday. It's called the Ride for Refuge. It's a walk or bike ride in Verdun. Cedar Park has often had teams of participants, and we have one this year. You're free to join us or make a donation to any one of us. Betsy Starr-Dalber is on our team. Apparently she's going to be across the ocean. She's going to walk 5 kilometers next Saturday wherever she is. Pat Jones, Martha Randy, Amy Barrett are all on our team. Hooray, hooray. So to repeat from the reading that we heard, do good, be rich in helping others, and be extravagantly generous. You know, God's dream is sometimes played out in a sanctuary on a Sunday morning. Sometimes it's in making sandwiches on a Wednesday afternoon. Apparently, it's sometimes making a messy church on a Saturday. And sometimes it's a bike ride on a Saturday morning. Que Dieu vous bénisse.
Thank you for listening to the Cedar Park United podcast. Episodes are produced by a small posse of volunteers who are super excited to bring you more progressive voices over the coming months. If anything in here inspired you or made you think, please consider leaving a positive review or subscribing. It matters.